Hello, in this video we're going to introduce property binding in JavaFX. So we're going to make a JavaFX program that draws a circle on the screen. And then we're going to use property binding to automatically position the circle inside the center of the window. So we'll see how this works in just a second. Over in Eclipse, I'm going to create a new JavaFX project. And we'll call this show circle centered. To this we'll add a new Java class in the default package and also called show circle centered. So the first thing we'll need is some imports. Okay, so we've imported JavaFX application, scene, color, and then a layout pane, circle, and our stage. So now what we're going to do is make our class extend from application. And again, that error is because we haven't implemented our start method. So let's do that now. Okay, now what we're going to do in our start method is create a pane and then a pane object, then create a circle object, and then we're going to add our circle to the pane, add our pane to a scene, and then draw the scene on our stage. Sounds easy. So let's get started. We'll create our pane object, which is simply calling the default constructor. We'll call the variable pane. Okay, next up we're going to create our circle, which is a circle object, and we'll use the default constructor. Next up we're going to set the radius, and we'll set this to 50. We're going to set the color of both the line and the fill of the circle. So set stroke, and we'll set this to black. Now the color class has a static black variable, so we can just go color.black, and now we'll set the fill to white. Again, we'll use color.white. Okay, now what we're going to do is add our circle to our pane, and the way we do this is to get all the children of the pane, which returns us a list, and then we can add our circle to the list. So pane.get children, then we go .add, and we add our circle. So now our circle is part of the pane. Next up, we're going to create a scene. And we're going to add our pane to this, and we're going to set the size of our scene to 200 by 200. Next up, we're going to set the title of our stage. Set the scene to the scene object we just created, and then show our primary stage. Next up, we'll create a main method so we can run our program from within Eclipse. So public static void main. And again, all we're going to do inside the main method is call launch with our command line arguments passed in as the parameter. So let's run this and see what happens. We get our circle rendered on the screen, but it's at 0, 0, which is not exactly where we want it. So we need a way of positioning this. The way we do it is, so circle has a property called center X and a property called center Y, which defines where the circle is going to be drawn. So there are a few ways we could do this. One would be to specifically set the center of our circle, and we'd do it like this. Set center X, and because we've got our scene 200 by 200, this would be 100, and we'd copy and paste this and set center Y in the same way. So now when we save and run, we get our circle centered in our window. However, when we resize the window, you can see it doesn't stay centered. How could we do this? Well, one way would be to write some code that checks the the dimensions of the window and updates this property accordingly. Or we could use property bindings to have this done automatically. So the way this works is we can define bindings between properties of different objects, or of the same object, but in our case it's of different objects. So we can bind the center X property of our circle to some other property, for example, the width of our pane. And if we do that, the updating the center of the circle will happen automatically because it will be bound to the width of our pane. The way we do this is like so. We get our circle object, and then we get the center X property. Now this is an object, it's all on its own. So we get the center X property, which is a double property. Then we call its bind method. And you can see here it takes in either an observable value or a property. So what we're going to do is bind it to the width property of our pane. Like that. Now, I just want to run this to show you what's going to happen. You can see here now that the circle's center X property is equal to the width of our window. That's not exactly what we want, but you can see the position automatically updates as we resize. So it's a good start. What we need to do is divide this width by 2 to get it centered again. However, we can't just do arithmetic like this because what we want is an object in here, not just a number. Luckily, the width property of our window has a bunch of different methods that we can manipulate it with. So in our case, we want to divide our width property by a number. So we're going to call, divide, and pass in 2 as the parameter. This is the equivalent of setting the center X of the circle to the width property divided by 2. We could do that with arithmetic if we were doing our own code, but with property bindings, we do it like this, and it will happen automatically. The alternative would be for us to have code where every time our window is drawn, we would need to update this to get the circle in the right spot. However, we can copy and paste this now and do the same thing with our our center Y property. In this case, we'll be getting the height of our pane and again dividing it by 2. So let's run this. And you can see here we've got our circle centered in the window like we did right at the start. However, when we resize the window, the circle stays centered. And this is happening automatically. We don't have to write any code to update the position of the circle. Just by binding the property of the center of the circle to the property of the pane's width and height, we get this happening automatically. And so with that, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.